you, what is your prior knowledge about research? So I know that all of us, or most of you, are really knowledgeable in terms of defining or identifying what is research. So it states that according to Pollitt and Beck, if we are going to go back with our PR1, so according to them, research follows a systematic procedure in order for us to answer our initial inquiry. And according to Alcantara and Spina, they also stated that when you are writing a research, you have to follow a standardized procedure in order for us to answer an adequate solution. So wala namang pagkakaiba when we are about to define what is research all about. So si quanti and si quali, they are really when we are talking about research, about the process of research, they're all the same. But later on, you'll understand what is the main difference between the two as we discuss and we proceed with our lesson for today. So sabi nga po natin, when we are discussing what is research, we have to follow the five, okay, the five characteristics of research. And what are those? If you can still remember, the research has five characteristics. The first one is we have to be systematic. So when we say systematic, we follow certain rules and procedures in order for us to answer our initial inquiry. The second one, we have to be objective. Okay, so our opinions, our personal perspective in a said topic are not really we are not required to give it. Okay, we are not allowed to share it unless we supported it with factual information, and that's empirical all about. When we say empirical, we have to look for references that could support or that will support our study to make it more reliable and valid. So the next one, we have the feasible. So when we say feasible, we make sure that our study is attainable at all means. Kaya nga natin, attainable in terms of financial, in terms of our resources, especially in this pandemic, you have to think of a topic that is really attainable. That at the end of the semester, we're able to finish it. Na wala tayong makikita any problem. And the last one, it should be clear. So later on, we will be discussing the different kinds of variables. And I hope you understand the meaning of it so that if time will come that you are about to do your own research or as we start our research, you'll understand how are we going to apply it in our quantitative research. So let's proceed with what is quantitative research all about. So there's a big difference between the quantitative research and qualitative research. If we can go back with our PR1, sige, balikan natin. Si PR1, qualitative research talks about more on the exploration of the life of people, the in-depth examination of their perspective and their experiences. Unlike the quantitative, it states here that it is a systematic investigation of an observable phenomenon. As you can see, they have the same meaning. Diba? If you can recall, sabi nga natin before, a qualitative research started with an observable phenomena. So ano ba yung sinasabi nating observable phenomena? When we say observable phenomena, in natural science, it is a phenomenon, it is a happening or an event that we encounter as we go along our way. So every now and then, meron at meron tayong na-encounter na event or happenings. So in that manner, diba, sabi nga natin, we believe that whenever we are doing research, we are about to observe first. Tingnan muna natin yung paligid natin. Ano ba yung current situation ng Pilipinas? Ano ba yung current situation mo as a person or in your community? Ano ba yung common problem? So by observing, you can now assess what are the possible problem, diba? So dun papasok si research. Okay, what are the possible problem? And then later on, you'll seek for answer kasi you have to investigate. You have to look for answer. So that is research. So sabi nga natin, quantitative research from the word itself, quantity. So before, we talk about the quality of the information, which talks about the qualitative research. But now, we are now focusing on the quantitative research, which states here that we gathers quantitative and numerical data. So more likely, we are now talking about with a large sample size. From before, we are using the inductive method, okay, from specific to general. Ngayon naman po, we are talking about with deductive method. So according to California State University, they stated that when we are talking to deductive method, it starts out with a general statement or hypothesis, okay, going down dun sa particular group of people na gusto natin patungkalan. So from the large sample, now you are going to a small sample, papunta doon, okay? So again, deductive method starts out with general statement of hypothesis and examine the possibilities to reach specific and logical conclusions. So next, so quantitative data uses statistical methods in order for us to understand or analyze our data later on. So again, we gather more on numerical data. So in here, we are now going to use different surveys, different tests that could give us scores. Later on, we'll be analyzing that using an appropriate statistical methods. So again, Quantitative research is a systematic investigation wherein we follow steps in order for us to come up with a solution. And then later on, we uses numerical data and we uses statistical methods in analyzing it. Okay? So unlike ng quali, di ba? In quali, it's more on words. It's more on analysis. It's more on how you interpret someone else's experiences. But now, we have the concrete basis. Hindi ka pwedeng magsabi na there is a significant difference among this phenomena to other phenomena kung wala kang basis. Okay? Kasi in quantitative, lagi tayong may basis because we uses statistical methods in order for us to understand a certain phenomena. Okay? Bago natin masabi na isang bagay, there is really a relationship between the two variables, we have to use correlational data or correlational treatment. So in there, di ba, malalaman natin, ngayon, kailan ba siya nagiging positive? Kailan ba siya nagiging negative? And that's quantitative research all about. Okay, concrete siya. We have basis. Unlike in quali, tayo lang. Kung ano lang yung naintindihan natin, kung ano lang yung nakita natin, yun lang din yung sasabihin natin. Okay? So I hope you understand the difference between the two and you understand what quantitative research all about. So next. So what are the statistical methods for quantitative research that we are to use, especially when you guys or you class are going to have your data analysis already? So the first one, we have the Pearson's R. So when we say Pearson's R, we are talking about here with the relationship of the two variables. Next, we have also the t-test, the presence of a statistical difference between the two variables. So just like what I have always I always reminded you that, or remind you rather na, sabi ko sa inyo na, during your stats and probability, you have to inculcate that in your mind kasi it's our disclaimer as your research teacher to be also your statistics or ano tawag dito, statisticians. Kasi hindi namin din siya totally kaya. But, and hindi rin naman natin siya pwedeng ilapit sa iba or sa mga math teachers natin. Unlike kung talagang close kayo, like kay Ma'am Domdom or other teachers, Ma'am Rova, kung talagang kaya. But in this situation, what we have right now, we more on rely on what, we more on rely kung ano yung knowledge na meron na talaga kayo. So I hope, na aalala nyo pa yung mga diniscuss before ni Ma'am Rova and ni Ma'am Domdom. Okay, again, persons are t-test. We also have the ANOVA. So ANOVA talks about the analysis of variance, statistical difference between the two variables. And the last one would be the multiple regression. But multiple regression, relationship between the several independent variable and one independent variable. So in here, these statistical methods do not limit us na ito lang yung gagamitin natin. Okay, when we have our study. Hindi po ibig sabihin na ito lang yung present ko, ito lang yung pwede natin gamitin. So it may vary, it depends on your research design. So again po, each statistical treatment has its own design. Hindi natin pwedeng gamitin si ANOVA if we are just looking with the relationship with the variables. So dapat alam din natin when to use it and how to use it para accurate yung makukuha nating sagot. Kasi kung mali yung magagamit nating statistical treatment, so same thing with what I have discussed during our PR1, di ba? Kung mali yung gagamitin nating analysis or data analysis procedure, i-apply natin into another one, pero hindi siya appropriate with this one or dun sa design na ginamit natin. Right as well, wag na natin ituloy kasi baka maguluhan lang tayo. Kasi po, hindi natin masasagot yung problem na meron tayo in the first place. So you have to understand that each statistical method has its own design. So hindi ka basta-basta lang na, eto maganda to sa person's R. Kasi kapag gano'n, malilito ka, and mahihirapan din po yung magbabasa. And hindi natin nga masasagot yung research natin or yung problem natin. And what will happen to our research? It's not valid and reliable kasi mali yung way of analyzing the data. So you have to be careful with it. So same thing, what I have mentioned before, all the things that you have to consider when you are writing a research, you have to think for it prior hand or beforehand para hindi na tayo naliligaw or hindi tayo mislead ng ginagawa natin. Okay? So as a researcher, always have your heart in your paper para, always put your heart in your paper para all throughout your journey, you understand what you're doing. Okay? So next. So what are the main goals of quantitative research? So the first one is to test a hypothesis or test hypothesis. So as you can see, in here, we are now going to use a hypothesis. So sabi ko nga sa inyo, everything that we are doing right now is we have to check yung ating gagamiting references or basis. Kasi nga po, quantitative research has a most accurate answers at the end of the paper kasi lagi tayong may basis. Test hypothesis using null and alternative hypothesis. Laging sa kanya naiikot yan. Okay? Laging iikot kay null and alternative hypothesis. Next. In quantitative research, we're able to explore or to know the causal relationship, the cause and effect and the relationship between it or between our variables. So in this time, kung before we're more on telling stories, kung ano yung nandyan, yan na yun. Ngayon, we get to explore, di ba? We get to know, ano ba yung cause? Bakit naging ganito? What is the cause? Bakit nakapag or nagkaroon siya ng coronavirus? So you have to know that. whenever you are doing a quantitative research, causal relationship or cause and effect relationship. So we also make predictions because we tend to use a hypothesis. So we are able to know if there is really a significant effect or there is no significant effect or relationship among the variables. Next, we tend to generalize the findings within a population since we are talking now with a large sample. Okay, we are now talking with a large sample. So sabi nga natin kanina, we use deductive from general to specific. So from the large sample, we apply our research into a small sample size. So mas accurate siya kasi mas marami yung magiging participants natin. Hindi lang siya tatatlo, hindi lang siya lilima. More likely, pwede na siyang 100 participants, 800, or mas madami pa. It depends on your topic. Okay, so soon, sabihin ko rin naman sa inyo yung mga yung number of participants na meron tayo para you know what to do. Habang nag-iisip kayo ng topic niyo, you also consider your participants. Kasi kasama naman yun, di ba? So pag alam mo na kung ilan, so it would be easy for you to identify ano ba yung gusto mong maging research title. So next, so as I have mentioned earlier, we generalize the findings because we uses the probability sampling. So when we are using probability sampling, everyone is given a chance to be part of the study. So yes, unlike before, we use non-probability. We set a specific goal. We set a specific standards in order for us to select our participants. But now, diba, by the use of sampling technique, we are now talking with a large population, and you can get whoever participants you want to have or you want to get the data.
So again, quantitative research primarily utilizes or uses probability sampling. So just like what we have mentioned earlier, we are now talking with a large population. So probability sampling is one of the best kind of sampling that fits with this goal of research or quantitative research. So let's proceed. So now, for probability sampling, it states here that it's highly randomized because, as you can still remember, or let's have a short recap of what probability sampling all about. It's more on giving a chance or we are giving the participants a chance or equal opportunity to be part of the study, regardless of their characteristics. So in here, unlike in our PR1, we set a standard, we set a characteristic. In this kind of research or in quantitative research, we highly randomize our participants, regardless of their situation, regardless of their characterization, or regardless of their classification, they could be a part of the study as long they are part of the research locale or population that we are pertaining to. So next, so lower level of subjectivity. So yun na nga, sinabi ko kanina, hindi kasi tayo nagsiset ng standard ko. So basta part sila ng population na sinasabi natin, so then they could be a participant of the study. So higher rate of generalizability. So what is generalizability? So it refers to the extent to which the findings not only represent the samples, but also the population at large. So meaning, population, di ba sabi nga natin, in a research local, we are talking about with the population. So under it, may mga tinatawag tayo na target population and accessible population. So ngayon tayo, at a large sample, the whole population, we're now talking with the large population. Regardless, dun sa, basta nasa target population natin sila, pwede silang maging participant na study natin. So like for example, if you're talking about with the senior high school students in Emilia Aguinaldo College, Cavite, regardless of their strand, they could be part of our study. As long as sinet mo. Like for example, kailangan mo ng 100 participants. So regardless of the strand, kung manggagaling man sila sa STEM, manggagaling man sila sa UMS, manggagaling man sila sa PVL or ABM, okay lang kahit saan sila galing. Basta makakabuo tayo na 100 participants na required dun sa study natin. Okay, that's generalizability. So meaning to say, once we finish the study, generalizability help us to generalize the findings. So kahit ilan man yung participant mo, they are pertaining with one diba? Meron silang pinapertain or meron tayong sinasagot na isang problem from or inside our senior high school community. Okay, so that's generalizability. So next, what are the strengths and weaknesses of quantitative research? So tingnan natin, ano ba yung strength and weaknesses ni quantitative research? Sabi dito, can be replicated or repeated in other contexts. So when we are using quantitative research, unlike quali, in here, pwede po tayong magkaroon ng ating mother thesis or tinatawag natin mother thesis or reference thesis. So we can replicate, when we say replicate, we can redo such paper. Ano lang natin siya, i-relate lang natin siya dun sa konteksto nung meron tayong sitwasyon. Okay, so pwede po natin siyang gamitin or gawin, but we do not encourage you to do so kasi we want you to experience to make your own research paper. Pero pwede po siya. In college, you can utilize that one. You can extend that. Pwede nyo i-gamitin. Pero at this moment, yes, you can have mother thesis, pero hindi natin siya purely gagayahin or kukopyahin. Okay? So sabi natin, repeated in other contexts in such way na papalitan natin yung magiging participants and our research local. But the paper itself, in terms of introduction, other things like methodology, pwede mo po siyang magamit. So, ganun po. Siguro magagamit natin in replication, repeated in other contexts yung paper natin. yun sa PR1. I suggest if we can convert it into quantitative, sabi ko nga sa inyo during our orientation, then let's do that para medyo ma-lessen din yung work niya at mas dali na sa part ninyo as a student. Kasi nga, di ba, we are in new normal, so medyo kailangan natin mag-adjust lahat. So that is parang simple help ko na for you kung sakali mang mako-convert natin siya. So next, provide findings that are generalizable to the large population. So sabi ko nga kanina sa inyo, we're now talking with a large population or a large number of participants. So whatever we are going to come up with our study, it represents the whole population kahit ilan lang yung makukuha natin na participants. Okay? Can make prediction based on numerical and quantifiable data. Sabi nga natin, we have concrete basis on how we are going to analyze. So, and that's according to alpha, di ba? Alpha level natin yung 0.05. So pag sinabi natin greater than and lower than, greater than or less than, So, doon natin malalaman kung either accepted si alternative hypothesis or rejected si alternative, or accepted si null hypothesis or rejected si null hypothesis. So, next, faster using of statistical software. So, we can use Excel, SPSS, and other statistical software that we can use or utilize in order for us to analyze the data as long as we have our data already. So, pwede natin siyang gawin. Yun yung sinasabi ko sa inyo, pag may Excel na kayo, pag meron tayong SPSS, maka-download kayo at least fractile. So, it would be easy for us to analyze the data and get the result of data. So, low degree of subjectivity. So, sinabi natin kanina, then less demanding of data gathering. So, unlike quali, di ba, ang dami nating requirements. Kay quanti, survey lang, Google Sheet lang, okay na, may result na tayo. So, next, its validity and reliability can be measured. So, its validity and reliability can be measured in terms of checking our instrument. And also, we have basis, sabi nga natin kanina, we have basis in analyzing our data. So, meaning, mas madaling makita natin kung meron ba tayong mali or tama pa ba yung ginagawa natin by simply using statistical treatment to measure our validity and reliability. So next, weakness. So yung weakness niya falls under with quali. Kasi sabi dito, cannot adequately provide in-depth information for describing and explaining a complex phenomena. So unlike kay quali, yun na nga, we tend to understand every bit of information about our participant. But in here, wala pong ganun. It's more on tabulation, computation, and once you have the result, and that's it. You don't need to understand bakit ganun yung result. Okay? Kasi you already have how to analyze that data. You already have that interpretation based on those computed mean scores or such values. Next, lack comprehensible description of human experiences. So yun na nga po, sinabi natin kanina. So intangible factors such as gender roles, economic status, and social norms are not advisable to actually use or to study because these topics are very sensitive. So if you want to study this one or to pursue a kind of study that pertains with these topics, so make sure na muna po fall siya kay quali kasi doon natin siya na-explore. But in here, hindi natin siya ma-explore by simply rating those experiences or those topics, di ba? Hindi naman natin pwedeng i-rate lang yung gender roles, yung socio-economic and social norms. It's more on this, di ba, exploration of life of people. So next, less flexibility in terms of study design. So yon, you can focus on one, so you can justify those studies then so be it. Okay? So responses are limited since you are going to use a structured questionnaire. Kung ano lang yung nakalagay doon and that's it. They have to answer that. Wala na silang, bakit ganito, bakit ganyan? Wala na tayong further explanation about it unless we are going to use mixed methods so we can have an open-ended question or interview at the latter part of our research. But in our research, we more likely focused on the side of quantitative work. We are just going to have our survey, tests, examinations, and once you have the score, and that's it. Okay? No further questions given by the researchers and no further questions given by the participants. Okay? And then, self-reported data may not be accurate. So, unlike nga kay quali, sabi nga natin, kay quali kasi it's more on your understanding. And this time, ito po, meron tayong basis. When we gather data, like for example, we computed the mean score or general grand mean with a value of 0.05, we are now able to identify kung anong klase siya. Anong klase siya? Like, accepted ba si alternative or rejected? What kind of relationship is that? So, meron tayong basis. Proceed with the kinds of research design. So in here, sabi nga natin before, when you are about to propose a topic, it's very important as a researcher to know what is the research design that you are going to utilize in your paper so that you'll know what to do, you know what to have in your paper. So in here, it's an overview of what are the different kinds of quantitative research, and so you'll know what so you'll have a knowledge already or meron ka ng prior knowledge na malalaman ano ba yung dapat mong gawin or ano ba yung dapat mong i-pursue sa quantitative natin or sa PR2. Let's proceed. The first one is we have the descriptive design. So from the word itself, the goal of this topic or this research design is to observe and report a certain phenomena. So you are about to see what happened in this particular phenomena, and then later on, you're just going to observe. As you can see, the goal of this topic is not to give you a cause and effect relationship or any cause and effect value. So you just simply observe and then report, and that's it. And next, what are the variables and experimental manipulation of this? Variables are measured as they occur. Sabi natin, just you have to observe, and then later on, ano yung nakita mo, then that's it. Okay? And experimental manipulation is not used because this one is a kind of non-experimental research. So the data collection used in descriptive research is questionnaire and observation. So the sample titles is assessing attitudes toward death and caring in comprehensive cancer center. So another example of this is when you are to see the results or the rate of COVID positive cases around Las Marinas. That's an example of descriptive research where in office of the mayor or someone is concerned in this particular issue will check and rate yung cases ng COVID natin in each barangay of Las Marinas. And there, that's it. They simply observe how many, and then they will report that this is the percentage or frequency of those COVID positive or PUI or PUM in such barangays. So that's an example of descriptive research. So next, for another one, correlational study is also a kind of non-experimental research. So when we say non-experimental research, we do not or we don't have any treatment that we are going to input or we are going to implement in our study. We simply observe, we simply determine, and that's it. Okay, so correlational design is to determine the nature of relationship between the variables without looking into causation. So same thing with our descriptive correlational design simply determines what is the association or covariance among two variables. Okay. So next, variables are measured and experimental manipulation is not used. So again, we also use questionnaire, test, and observation in this particular research. So sample titles, the relationship between service quality and customer satisfaction in telecommunication industry, evidence from Nigeria. So if you are to relate, if we are to make a research title out of our situation during this pandemic, so pwede natin siyang gawin, the relationship of using face mask in contacting COVID coronavirus 2019. So that would be, we'll see if really there is a relationship when you are to use face mask in contacting this coronavirus. Okay? So do you understand that? So we just want to know if there is a linear relationship between the variables. So the variables there is the using face shield or face mask and then the latter one is contacting the coronavirus. So lagi nilang titignan dapat yung pagre-relate natin is somehow malapit sila sa isa't isa. Huwag mo namang gawin na correlational pero yung variables mo sobrang opposite with one another. So dapat ano sila, what do you call this, parang ayun yun nga yung basta yun na yun. Basta ano siya, wag masyadong malayo. For example, kung school siya to peer pressure, wag naman yung yun na yun. So next, we have the expo factor. So in here, this one is a kind of experimental design to determine the nature of relationship between the variables without looking into causation. So you have to know ano ba yung causes. Okay, when we say expo factor, you tend to explore the causes or the effects of a particular phenomena. Pwede ka lang mag-focus ng puro cause, you give the effects, while bibigay mo na si effects, bibigay mo na si cause, effects naman yung hahanapin natin. And that's, as you can see, so manipulation have limited use, and according to this, the variables or the participants in our quasi-experimental should establish, or we call them as the intact group, or intact groups are used, or individual or subjects are randomly assigned to treatment and control group with the same characteristic. So when we say quasi-experimental, you have to establish your intact group. So meaning to say intact group are a group of people with the same characteristic with one another. So as you can see here, the data collection technique would be questionnaire, test, and observation. So as you can see, sample title would be the impact of smoking bans on smoking and consumer behavior. So as you can see, our intact group here, if you can identify, those are the smokers because we are talking about the smoking bans and smoking behavior, okay, or consumer behavior. So next one is the pure experimental design. So same with quasi, they have to establish cause and effect relationship. Okay, pure experimental is pure experimental manipulation is used. So again, the difference between pure and quasi is that in quasi, meron po tayong tinatawag nga na intact group, pero in pure experimental, we randomize our participants. So regardless of their characteristic, pwede na silang maging participant of our study. Okay, the random assignment of the individual subject provides more conclusiveness as to causal relationship between the variables. Next. So we have the tests in data collection techniques. So in pure experimental, in pure and quasi-experimental, we both implement a treatment or yung natawag nating experiment itself. So in there, you have tests na pwedeng gawin, pwedeng post-test, pwedeng pre-test. Pwede rin naman consecutive tests just for us to know what is the effectiveness or how effective such things na binigay natin dun sa mga participants natin. So in here, experimental effects of exposure to pornography, the moderating effect of personality, and the mediating effect of sexual arousal. Okay, so next. So what are the kinds of variables and their uses? So in here, variables are the elements, sabi nga natin before, or entity which can be measured for quantity or quality. This one is very important. We have to know what are the variables we have in our study in order for us to be guided. Ano ba pinag-aaralan mo? Dapat alam mo siya. So that, sabi nga natin, you have to be clear para hindi tayo nami-mislead what to do and how to do it. Okay? You may manipulate or control these variables depending on the kind of research you are conducting. As I have mentioned earlier, in the different kinds of research or quantitative research, it states there that if this design can be manipulated or that. So nakita naman natin doon. If non-experimental, hindi natin sila pwede i-manipulate as is. But in pure experimental, in quasi, limited lang, but in pure experimental can be manipulated. So when we say manipulation, it's how we are going to get the result based on our hypothesis. If we want to know if we want to get if there is really an effect or effectiveness in such treatment that we are to implement with our participants, the manipulation that we can use make there or apply in that paper or treatment is hangga't wala tayong nakitang result, hindi tayo titigil, or hangga't hindi natin aatin yung result na gusto natin, continuous lang yung pagpapa-exam natin sa participants. And that's manipulation. Okay? Next. So we have the quantitative variables, it states here, can be measured using numerically or measured numerically. So we have the discrete, so can be counted as full numbers. So not described in ranges. So ano po ba yun? We have the frequency, behavior, and group size. Well, the continuous from the word itself, continuous, also referred as interval. Okay? Measured in ranges can be denoted by whole numbers, by non-whole numbers. Example, the temperature. And a special type of continuous variables is ratio, like height, weight, and scores. Okay, distance and scores. Next. So we also have, if we have quantitative, we also have qualitative variables, and tinatawag natin silang categorical. So lack numbers or lack numerical value, assigning value to specific categories. So kung kanina, puro numbers, when we are talking with temperature, diba, alam na agad natin kung what kind of variables is that, kasi number siya. But in here, qualitative variables pertains to the words, yung mga words, blood type, colors, like that. Okay, or specific categories. And if you have qualitative variables, you can give a specific value in order for us to measure that. Pwede mo silang bigyan. Like for example, dichotomous or dichotomous, two distinct categories or values only, a response to yes or no. So syempre, sa exam natin or test, ang kailangan nga natin malaman is test scores. So hindi mo lang siya pwedeng ilagay as, diba? Hindi mo lang siya pwedeng ilagay na yes or no. Pwede mo siyang gawin yes or no. So bibigyan mo siya ng numerical value, gagawin mo 1 and 2. So at the end of the topic or at the end of the examination, it would be easy for you to get the result. Kung puro yes yung sagot niya, ano ba yung value ng yes? So lagyan mo siya ng total scores, and then later on the latter side, lagyan mo siya ng legend or classification kung ilan yung score na makukuha. Then you can now easily identify ano ba yung nakuha niyang score and ano yung ibig sabihin. So same thing with nominal, the hair color, marital status, blood type, transportation, source of income, and citizenship. So those are the kind of variables na madalas din natin na-encounter in quanti, pero quali sila, so you have to give them value. So 1, 2, 3, ganyan. Lalagyan mo lang siya. So characteristic of both quali and quanti, that's ordinal. Can be ranked in order. Frequency, ito yung tinatawag natin in ordinal, ito yung mga kind ng examination that you are going to rate. Okay? I-rate mo how, how many times a day you play ML. So sasagutin mo siya dyan. Rare, seldom, sometimes, never, neutral, parang ganun. So that's ordinal, you rate. And then same with this, pag sinabi natin qualitative variables, we tend to give them a value so that at the end of the examination, we're able to get the scores. Diba? Then dapat meron tayong legend na nag-explain ano yung level na yon. Okay, so it would be easy for us to analyze the data na nakuha natin from our participants. So next, so variables can also be categorized based on their purpose and role. Sabi ko nga sa inyo before in our PR1 and PR1, sabi natin, maraming terminologies that you are going to encounter in research, but you have to keep in mind na dapat naintindihan natin sila para hindi tayo nalilito kasi nag-ano lang naman sila, nagko-cross lang din sila ng line, nagbabatuhan lang si qual and si quanti or si even si mixed method. So if you understand what are terminologies that we have from other research into one research, it would be easy for us to integrate it with one another. So again, for experimental research, so tinatawag po natin yung variables natin as dependent and independent variable. Okay, when we say dependent variable, these are the variables being examined for changes or presumed effect siya ni independent variable. So independent variable is considered to affect the dependent variable. So because of independent variable, the result of dependent variable may change or may occur. Okay, so remember, nagbabago si dependent, pero si independent as is siya, kung paano natin siya bigyan. Okay, so kailan po natin tinatawag na dependent and independent variable? If we know that our study is under experimental research or is experimental design. So ano lang ba yung meron tayong experimental design? We have the quasi and the pure experimental. Doon lang tayo magkakaroon ng dependent and independent variable. How about descriptive, correlational, and ex-post factor? Since they are under non-experimental research, we refrain or we avoid to use the terms dependent and independent variables because they are non-experimental. So how do we call our variables under this research design? So simple lang po, tawagin na natin silang variables. Okay, so yun lang. So meaning, pag sinabi natin dependent and independent variable, it would be easy for us to understand, yung research na ay experimental. So depende na, naglalaro na yun sa dalawa, kung quasi or pure. Pero pag narinig mo lang our variables are this, so meaning, alam mo na kung ano siya, because it's under non-experimental research. And you have to be careful with that. Ganun kasi ang mga teacher. So pag nagkamali tayo dyan, it may affect, again, lahat naman isang pagkakamali natin, it may affect always the result of the study. Doon yung fallback natin, diba? Ay yung fall ground natin, doon at doon. Sa pagkakamali natin, laging result yung makikinabang. So you have to be careful with that. So next, ito yung sinasabi ko sa inyong extraneous variable. Extraneous variables are a special kind of variables. So meaning, ano siya, sabi dito, any variable that is not categorized or considered as dependent and independent variable. So huwag kayong malilito Sabi nga natin kanina, tinatawag lang natin na dependent and independent variable kapag experimental. Then variable pag non-experimental. So sabi dito, any variable that is not categorized as dependent or independent variable or variables kung hindi siya binanggit sa study mo or hindi siya classified as your topic. So that's extraneous variable. It is an undesirable that can influence the result of the study. So sabi ko nga sa inyo dati, kung hindi tayo aware dun sa takbuhin ng paper natin, it may affect laging yung result. So you have to be careful. Paano natin malalaman na meron na tayong extraneous variable if we see na hindi na siya aligned dun sa ating study like this one. So confounding variable is same with extraneous variable. It's a type of extraneous variable which is variable that the researcher fails to control to threatens the validity of the research procedure. So it's very understandable. So the importance of, so an example of this, sige, bigyan ko kayo ng example ng ating confounding variable. So this means that when we say confounding variable, these are the kinds of variables that has a relationship with dependent variable or the other variables that may arise, but not in the variables that have mentioned in our study. Again, meron kang variable na pinag-uusapan sa study mo, but upon data gathering, merong umaangat na iba pang variable na hindi siya na-mention, pero nakikita natin upon data gathering, and that's extraneous variable. So, wag kang malilito. Okay, wag kang malilito. Basta isipin mo lang, na pag hindi mo na pag-usapan sa study mo, pero pag nag-data gathering ka, merong lumabas na ibang factors affecting yung title mo. So, that's already a confounding or extraneous variable. So, let us give an example to better differentiate the types of variables based on their purpose. So, again, so you are now conducting a study on the effects of using face shield in contacting the COVID-19. So the independent variable is the use of shield. So gumamit ka ng face shield. While the dependent variable is contacting COVID-19. One of the possible extraneous variable in this study is the time and venue of contacting COVID-19. Okay, conducting the test in air-conditioned room may negatively or positively affect someone to contact COVID-19. So if this variable is not controlled, it may become the main factor behind the contacting COVID-19 and the use of face shield. And then it ceases to be an extraneous variable, becomes the confounding variable. So yun po siya. Next. So what would be the importance of quantitative research across fields? So why do we need to talk about or why do we need to conduct a research study across fields or yung tinatawag natin disciplinary research? So in social inquiry, we tend to study the behavior and social interaction among individuals. So that's very important. We have to know, explore, diba? We have to assess what are the behaviors and social interaction that we can. Next, information communication technology, the trends and tendencies in the use of IT, the arts, methods that enhance one's creativity, science, effectiveness of new developed medicine treatment, sports, the relationship of health in one's performance, agriculture and fisheries, how agriculture is being influenced the global trends, and business, syempre napakalaga nito, assess approaches that help companies in decision-making practices. So that sums our topic for this week. And if you have any question, any clarification, or violent reaction about our discussion, please list down on a sheet of paper or in your notebooks, and then on our synchronous session, we'll try to answer all of those. So thank you very much for listening, and God bless everyone.
Bye.